What is the point of today's video? We're going to be telling a story, going through a journey as to how to refute the French defense. I play the French defense, but I also love playing against the French defense, and I'm going to show you how to play the King's Gambit style approach against the French. So, who's ready for some theory? Today's a great day. You ever just wake up and be like, I'm awesome, right? The world needs more of that. It needs everybody to just start doing that. Don't care about what people say about you. Don't be like, wah, hard day incoming. No. Just be like, this is awesome. Let's put our theoretical shades on and get into it. So, e4, e6. We're going to be reviewing the La Bourdonnais French defense counter. Think of it as like a King's Gambit against the French. But to give some background, my student just played in a tournament and he currently plays the King's Indian attack. Fine. This is what Bobby Fischer, for a large part of his career, played against the French defense. He loved this. Let me show you a cool line, though. So d5, knight to d2, and this is what I play as black against this, and I think it is very, very nice. Knight to c6, knight to f3, right? King's Indian attack. They're going to go for g3, bishop g2, almost certainly. Knight to f6. Typically here, what does white do? Well, white goes g3. What do you do if they push? It's a fine move. Pushing is a fine move, d4, but then f6. And this is just a fun position for black. I love this position for black. You get the open f file. You play for e5. Your knights get into the game. Your bishops become activated. It's very, very fun for black, in my opinion. In my fact. Just kidding. All right. Knight to f6. Pawn to g3. The second you see pawn to g3, you want to take on e4. Because you know that their bishop is not getting committed to the queen side. You know it's getting fianchettoed on the king side. Not to mention, they cannot take the pawn with the knight because that would be an unfavorable queen trade. By all means, go ahead, but that's not good for white. They should take with the pawn. What do you do here as black? You go pawn to e5. Isn't that weird? It's like you're losing a tempo, but you're not. Sometimes losing a tempo could be good because now they don't expect e5. What, they have a fianchetto against a blockaded pawn? Round of applause for them, right? Who cares? So bishop to g2, bishop to c5, castles. This is the whole point. Pawn to a5. What does this move do? Well, it lets your rook guard your bishop come b6, right? So c3, b6. You might be like, I don't understand. What is the point of this position? Inaccuracy. Be my guest. Fine by me. If queen a4, bishop d7, their queen is not on a great diagonal. So typically queen c2, let's just get it on the board. Bishop to a6. So this is the whole point of the opening. Right, wherever they put this rook, say they go to d1. Well, rook d1, actually, bishop d3 just wins the game because b5 and the queen actually gets trapped. Isn't that amazing? Look at this. Bishop to d3, say queen a4, pawn b5, queen b3, pawn a4. That queen is trapped. So rook d1 is actually a blunder. But typically the point of this bishop is to go knight to g4 and connect here on f2, and you're just winning the game. So I was like, hey, do you want to play the King's Indian attack against the French? My student was like, no, actually not really. Can we rediscuss the Bourdonnais? And I was like, absolutely. And that was the intro to today's video. So we're going to be looking at a game between Igor Glek and Edvins Jirkalis. Igor Glek is a Soviet GM. Edvins is, I think, a CM or some 2200, but the imbalance makes it a good game to look at. By the way, if you look at the database, Nakamura has played this, Carlsen, all of the top names, and they all scored very, very well with this. So it is a realistic, good opening. Pawn to d5, pawn to e5. Let's get into it. Pawn to c5, right? We're not stopping them from playing the French structure. What is the point of this? Well, patience. We'll get to it. We got knight to f3, knight to c6, and pawn c3. Now the point is being made. What is the point of pawn c3? Well, you know in the French defense how you typically have a pawn on d4 and it all becomes about them adding pressure on d4 and you adding defense on d4? The Bourdonnais, not so much. d4 does not hang on a razor's edge, and the point of pawn to c3, the main point, the deeper point other than going pawn d4, is actually to route the knight to a3 to c2 where it guards d4. That's a whole extra defender on d4. You're always going to be chilling in the center then. You might be like, okay, well, what if they go pawn d4? Fantastic question. Here, just know you need to play bishop to d3. The point is, anytime they take, you avoid the unfavorable queen trade. If they don't take, if they leave it there, you're going to castle, meet them in the center over here. A lot of the ideas will represent Grand Prix ideas. You double up the pawns. You have a pawn on f4. Yeah, d5 and f5 are holes for black's knight to get to, but we're going to tackle all of this, right? So, pawn c3, we got knight e7, knight to a3. Okay, knight f5, inaccuracy. What to do? Well, the way I teach it is anytime you see a knight come to f5, you go bishop d3 first. Some people play for knight c2, d4 first. I don't think it works as well. Bishop d3, statistically, it scores better. Computer likes it better. I like it better. All of the above, right? All the important stuff. So bishop to d3, yeah. A lot of the times you get g3, h4, king f2, maybe even castles like knight g5, blockaded kingside. I can make more videos on that if you guys are interested. But okay, knight to c2. We get bishop to e7 and bishop to d3. So he just tweaked the move order a little bit. Doesn't make too much a difference. Castles, what do you do? What would you do here? I'm in favor of taking the knight and having their bishop be a bad pawn over here on e6. But we got castles first, okay? Pawn c4, horrible move. Why would you overextend? You only overextend if you're trapping the bishop. The point of this bishop was to take. So castling was then justified by the mistake c4 because now the pawn is on c4 instead of c5, and that should make white very, very happy. What do you play here? Many people might say pawn to d4, but then they're going to start expanding on the queen side. Maybe they could justify c4. The correct way to punish this is typically b3, but in this position it is actually d3. Right? And then you might be like, well, what if they take? I mean, that's kind of just like free money for white, right? That's a stimmy check, right? That just strengthens the currency. It's a good stimulus. Who doesn't like free money? It's good for the economy. No sarcasm detected, right? But it's free development in all seriousness for white. So we get bishop to e6. That is like a bad pawn. That should make you very happy, and I get this type of position a lot. Bishop to e3, okay, development. Typically, if you're playing for d4, you'll get this queen on e2, you recapture on d4 when they take, and then your queen guards b2 against b6. Queen b6, however, never happened because bishop e3. I'm trying to explain these extra ideas. Queen to c7, knight f to d4. Okay, maybe knight f to d4 because it opens up the queen. We got knight takes. What would you take back with? I would take back with the knight. He takes back with the bishop. Fine. To each their own. Again, this is always going to be free development for white. I love this bishop here on d4. Like, oof, very good bishop. A lot of the times you just solidify it. There's so many positions I'm thinking of right now. We'll get there in some video someday if you guys would like this. All right, a4, we get some queenside expansion. Rook fb8. Now it looks like black's playing a banco. I'm all for the banco, but this ain't too banco-y. What should white do? White really needs to just gain space over here on the queen side. Instead, he went knight e3. Now that white did not gain space, black should solidify, disallowing him from gaining space in the center, and then gain space on the queen side, rather, not the center himself. Pawn h5, I quite do not like this move. He was afraid of g4. h3, g4 are going to be some ideas later on, but okay, b4. Yeah, takes, very good position for white. Right, there's nothing there for black on the queen side. Very awkward position. Aren't the happiest bishops I've ever seen. So we get a5, get some expansion. Black stops any further expansion. Queen f3. Love this move. Okay, I wanted some h3, g4 stuff. I love queen f3, right? It's very tangible. It hits the base of a pawn chain. Forces the rook over to d8 in our human eyes. It does. And rook f to d1, guarding this pawn on d3. Right, you might be like, well, why did he not take? This pawn will get taken with interest. You're going to take, you'll collect this pawn later. This bishop backwards guards the pawn. It doesn't make too much sense to take on d3. I think rook d8 rather makes more sense. We got rook f d1, rook ac8. All right, he's re-coordinating his rooks, and look at that. h3, good guy. Takes, of course, rook takes, and bishop to c5. Black's like, I would love to trade. White's like, well, okay, but we're trading on my terms. Knight c2. Love this move. The point is, if bishop takes, knight takes, that is a fantastic square for the knight, and we're well guarded over here on c3. Black shifts out of the way. Prophylactics on pinning himself. Maybe we're going to get rook to g1, g4. Nice prophylactics. Takes, and rook to c4. What should you do here? You should definitely play the move knight to c6. I think that's begging to be played. Okay, he goes queen f2. Calls it a mistake. You know why it calls it a mistake? Because it wants rook d c8, knight c6, you sack, and it's an equal position. Yeah, it makes some sense. Equal position. Bishop for rook. Well, bishop and pawn for rook, but black is coordinated. Makes some sense. We're going to get something similar, but instead we get rook e8, knight c6. Queen jumps to c7, queen jumps to h4. Now there's no move like bishop to d7 because of knight e7, so that's the point of queen to h4. So he takes. I think it's a sensible move. I think it's a sensible move, right? You change the dynamic of the pawn structure, the whole dynamic of the position, and it's like you need to win a whole new game. How do you win this? Let's discuss. So what is the weakness in black's position? Well, I mean, that's a bad bishop for sure. But what's the weakness? What's the tangible target? I think it's b6, right? It's on a dark square. It's a backwards pawn. It can be built up a pawn. So we're going to target b6. So consolidate. Queen to e1, love this move. Just consolidate. Rook to a3, also love this move, guarding from the side. You're going to build up on the b file. This bishop, trash. Queen c5, queen a1, guarding everything. All right, it's a little slow, but it's fine. Rook to d4, look at that. He's just shuffling and untying his pieces, right? Everything guards everything. We got rook b3, queen b1, aiming at b6, the weakness, and then queen to d3. Nice move. What's the point? Well, the point is to get your queen in. Engine's going to love slow playing it, right? Like king h2, pawn up, yada, yada. But okay, queen a6, I love this move. You got to win. You got to win the game. You got to get into the position. We got rook b7, queen a8. Now he's behind enemy lines. Look at that. Look at that. He moved it from b1 to b8. Fantastic guy. We got rook b7, queen d8, aiming at the base of the pawn chain yet again. So now the rook cannot move because black will lose this pawn. So he moves the bishop. We get king up. All right. Apparently you could win by just going queen f6, queen d6, trading off into an endgame. But what's the best piece in the endgame? The king. Look at this king activation. King h2, king g3. Right, and it's hating all these moves, but the bar is still up. The bar is still up. We still up. King to g5. Very hard to play this position. It wants queen c5, and then you bring the king back, and then you win with queen f6, and get your queen to d6 eventually. But we got rook to b7. How do you win? There's a couple ways. Start with queen f6, and then what? g4. This was the idea all along. Super scary. You know what's amazing? I was just thinking in terms of bug house. If black just had a knight, that would be checkmate. Isn't that ridiculous? But pawn to g4, very good move. Essentially, it's just Zooks one. If black does nothing, white's going to go here, here, checkmate him. So he takes, we get takes. If pawn takes, how do you win? You bring the rook back and you checkmate him on h8. And what do you do if he takes with the bishop? Oh no. Did white mess up? No. I guess black was hoping not to see the queen, but there is a queen there. The GM did see that there's a free queen there, and black resigned. So a cool way to face the French. Have you guys ever heard of the Bourdonnais before? I believe the La Bourdonnais is French, right? That's got to be a French term. So, thank you as always for watching. I'll see you guys on the flip side. That is soon. Peace.